Hi, everyone. Ed Bixby here from the Global Green Burial Alliance, and this is Spotlight Now. This morning, I'm here with John Wilkerson and Fawn Hendricks, and I'm going to give this is really a beautiful bio because, we always like to give a lot of information about the people that we interview. And John had inherited a 350-acre farm from his parents, John Wilkerson, and with his brother, Bill Wilkerson, and turned that family land into a nature preserve and green cemetery. Opening in 2002, Glendale Memorial Nature Preserve became the first conservation cemetery in Florida and the second site to open in all of the United States. John has dedicated a majority of his life to creating this serene, eco-friendly space that honors the memories of loved ones while sustaining natural Florida ecosystems. Under John's guidance, Glendale Memorial Nature Preserve continues to be a benchmark for preserving nature while ensuring that the legacy of those we cherish continues to thrive within the embrace of nature with alternative burial practices. Glendale Memorial Nature Preserve is located in the Florida Panhandle in North Walton County. The preserve offers the perfect resting place for those who would like to return to sanity and simplicity regarding death and burial. Nestled in a restored longleaf pine forest, the preserve offers a tranquil setting for a natural burial space with an outside chapel pavilion perfect for small gatherings, along with a boardwalk overlooking Lake Barbara. The preserve stands to keep burial simple, saying, quote, "No embalming fluid, no vault, casket must be biodegradable. You don't even need a casket. A king-size basket, the king-size blanket or quilt works just as good, if not better. We want your body, but we don't mean to rush you." Welcome, John and Fawn. So I was speaking to John a little bit before the interview started, and he was really getting into some interesting information concerning his journey, which I want him to be able to share with all of you. So, John, can you tell us a little bit about Glendale Memorial Nature Preserve and how that property came to be designed? Give the audience a picture of what the preserve is like.
It's mostly longleaf pines that we planted on farm fields that had been cleared, I don't know, 150 years ago probably, by a white man who came here and ran out of possums and raccoons to eat and had to grow something to eat. And the soil of this particular property is exceptionally good for this part of the world, which I guess is why they could grow enough food here without modern chemicals and fertilizers to stay here as early subsistence settlers. Anyhow, my parents had bought this place over the years and a little at a time and farmed it. Me and my brother farmed. At some point, parents died and gave us the property with the understanding that we were not to break it up into little pieces. They did not leave us the bazillion dollars drawing interest to pay the tax man. Turns out you do not own property. You pay yearly rent to your friendly government. But long story short, there's no taxes on a cemetery. Aha. So that was the answer to our search, if I may. And our mother had kind of set us up for this our entire lives, mostly due to her aversion to embalming. So we had already buried both parents in a little church cemetery that they'd given the property to the church many years ago, using a green burial, but we didn't know the terminology. We just knew that there's no law anywhere requiring embalming fluid. There's no law anywhere requiring a vault. The church cemetery did require a vault, but we didn't know it and didn't do it, and nobody called us on it. Anyhow, we buried both parents, doing it ourselves. Essentially, we had farm equipment. A little backhoe, we dug the grave, and then started trying to figure out how to preserve the property. And then subsequently learned that if your property is zoned agriculture in the state of Florida, you automatically qualify to be a cemetery. But to actually get that information out of the bureaucracies turned out to be pretty difficult. It was a long process for a couple of naive country boys who didn't know anything about, nobody knew how to do this, right? We were number 2 in the nation. Number 1 was in South Carolina, Dr. Billy Campbell, and he helped us a lot. He met with us in Tallahassee and talked to bureaucrats and helped us work our way through the fine nuances of actually doing this. We gave the property to a nonprofit corporation that we created. We wrote into the bylaws, we get to live here the rest of our lives, which is a pretty neat thing. You ever notice when you own stuff, it owns you?
Yeah.
Anyhow,
Absolutely.
it's I don't know if I'm allowed to say this or not. I liken it to a miniature Hillary Clinton foundation.
Well,
We get to live like millionaires even though we own basically nothing. It's
I
quite
understand.
it's quite a fun thing. So far we've buried 185 whole body burials. We don't have to keep up with cremains, so don't know. We've got basically 50 chickens, 40 something cats, 1 chicken, 1 guinea pig, and 1 goat are marked, grave marked, mapped, permanent residents.
That's great. It sounds like you've done well, and you've got the right attitude. You know, most of the people that we deal with, you know, with the Global Green Burial Alliance, consumer or provider, are people just like you, John, people who kind of weren't born into this industry, but saw a need and saw a desire and a way to make it happen. What we noticed was that you have a pretty unique and extensive trail system. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, Fawn's husband is a marathon runner.
Yeah.
And he, I hope this is right, good information. He needed trails to practice on, so as he created these running trails from things that we had done over the years, mostly from roadways around the farm fields and fire breaks. So we had started these places. Anyhow, this guy takes our little tractor and our bush hog and maintains a very nice trail system, which is wonderful.
And that's a great thing about out here is because we're not just a green cemetery, we're also a nature preserve. And we're dedicated to maintaining the natural Florida ecosystem on top of being that green cemetery. So allowing the trails, people can come out and visit us throughout the day and they can see the natural Florida flowers that pop up all throughout the year. They can see the longleaf pines and how they go about their life cycles. So it's a nice way for them to get out and get into nature as well. We have a designated cemetery area, but you know, if that's not what people are out here to see and they just want to come for the nature aspect of it, we have miles of trails where, you know, you probably won't even come in contact with a burial at that, you know, intersection there. But you can go out and you can explore and take in beautiful natural Florida. I think Florida, especially North Florida, is beautiful in the spring and summertime with all of the flowers that we get.
It sounds wonderful, and I can, you know, I can attest. It's about the living, you know, creating that green recreational space. And what's beautiful about what you've done is it didn't take any type of engineering or ingenuity. It was something that came naturally, you know, as your husband and your farm, you know, progressed through this. So that's great, and I encourage people to go visit. You know, if you're in North Florida, sounds to me like it's a great place to go check out and walk the trails. So let me ask you this, for the viewers to conceptually see, what does your funeral experience look like at Glendale, and what does the process entail? Are the families hands-on? Are they involved? Or how, if I were to have a funeral, what would I expect?
We attempt to get the family involved. It usually works to some extent. What we actually do is dig a grave. We put some boards across the grave and stage the casket and or body if there's no casket. We tell people blanket or sheet works or quilt works just as good, and that's actually done maybe 50-60% of the burials. There's no actual box as such. We try to get the family involved. Like I said, sometimes it works 100%, sometimes it's shaky. To help get the body in the grave, we offer them the opportunity to shovel some dirt with the words of, hey, physical activity eats a lot of emotion. Most times, some or all of them go for it to some extent. Uh, we try to use, we call it nature's astroturf. We try to find some pine straw. We can always find pine straw. Sometimes we find look pretty plants depending on the time of the year, something blooming, something green, and to take away the shock of bare dirt.
Mhm.
And at some point, we crank up the little tractor with a front end loader on it and push the rest of the dirt back on the grave and cover it with some more pine straw, plant some bulbs. We've learned some of the things that survive and come back year after year here. The deer have also learned a lot of those things and eat them as soon as we plant them. And we don't mow the grass. We use the big lighter maintenance system. We set fire to the place. So part of what we tell people is you can plant any kind of plant you want to out here. Most of them are not going to survive due to the deer and the fire. We make
Right. No, absolutely.
we make two little metal markers. We've learned to do it ourselves by melting down soda pop cans and Briggs and Stratton lawnmower blocks and brass water faucets. We create a brass marker and aluminum marker. Brass at the head of the grave, aluminum at the foot. We hand stamp name, date of birth, and date of death in the little marker. And we make a map referencing some numbered concrete posts showing where the grave is. The state of Florida says we must permanently be able to identify who's buried where. The bureaucrats say that what we're doing is better than most cemeteries.
And I'd say almost 100% of our stuff that we do out here is recycled, reused, repurposed. So with that, it goes along with our green theme that we have here. Not only are your body good for the environment for what we're doing out here, but we're also recycling those metals and things that would normally go into the landfill, and we're repurposing that as markers instead of a traditional headstone that you would see at a traditional cemetery nowadays.
Right. No, absolutely. I mean, obviously with the fire, if someone was using something biodegradable, that wouldn't be the right choice. So what you're doing, makes sense. Not only does it satisfy the state and their requirements, but then the family as well. So no, it sounds to me like all the things you're doing, is good and in the right direction. Oh, is this one of your little? Okay, check it out.
That's
Yeah,
one of
see
them
that's
there.
These are
and go ahead.
these are store-bought survey markers that go onto a piece of rebar. But we've learned to make them ourselves, which is a little bigger than these and genuinely authentic recycled materials. It's obvious.
Yes, correct.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you showed the audience that because, on our videos, we have people like yourself who are interested in getting into this and they ask these questions. What do I do? How do I do it? So I hope that inspires them to want to do something very similar. Let me ask you this. I'm sure your community, you've been there for quite a while, so everyone I'm sure knows who you are. How did they initially receive the project, and currently, are you seeing a lot of like advanced sales? Do you have people who are coming along saying, I want this in the future?
Yes, and sort of. The license we operate under says that we cannot take money until, let's see, how does it go? We're not allowed to sell any burial merchandise. We can only charge money for opening and closing of the grave space at time of need. That's the way the Florida statutes word this. We do
Right.
charge $1,800. So if people do come up here quite often and say, I want to get all this done. So you can act as your own funeral director in the state of Florida. Anybody can act as funeral director, but in fact, by the time most people actually die, there's nobody left in their immediate family and or neighbor down the street willing and able to actually get it done. So in most cases, probably, I'm gonna say 60, 70%, 80% of the now has changed. People end up going to a licensed funeral director. They can pay that person in advance for that funeral director's fees and our fees. So that's what we've learned to recommend to people, to just make it simple and get all this, get it done off their mind.
Right. And that's interesting for the viewers as well, because cemetery law is fairly the same kind of boilerplate, but that's something very different that Florida does. Unlike other states you can sell cemetery property if you wish it with deed and things like that. So that's interesting that they've changed that. That definitely changes the dynamic for you guys, but it's a good way. What you've just suggested is a good way to take care of that portion of it, so that the families can, make those arrangements for the future. Uh, so I know that you guys make wooden caskets. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Uh, I built my first wooden casket probably in 1979 as a result of having a little sawmill and having a guy come here and tell me he wanted a plain rectangular box with removable shelves. And I built one and sold it to him for $100. At the time of my sawmill career, that was pure gravy. And I built 2 or 3 more and used them for shelving in my house where I lived.
We actually have one here in our office, and I'll pan over real quick so that you can see. This is one of our caskets here. It's being used in our office to hold a lot of our merchandise, like our cups, and we have some local honey up on top. But this is our casket here, and it has these shelves that we can take out. You can use it to store whatever you need. You can purchase these ahead of time. This is not
Right.
something that the cemetery sells. This is something that, John as an individual does, because that goes
Oh, okay.
along the basis of we're not allowed to sell burial paraphernalia as a cemetery. So that's something
Right.
a little bit separate than the cemetary itself.
Thank
Okay.
you, Paul. Here's what I do. If you want to buy a casket, that's this guy right here, not this guy. Seems to be
Absolutely.
working.
Yeah.
That's great. And that's really, over the years, I've seen lots of different unique ways to make them useful until the time of need. So that's a really interesting conversation piece, that people can have. Say, hey, you like my bookshelf and my permanent residence someday.
My permanent, exactly, yeah.
Everybody needs shelving. On the other hand, you do not need this box to be buried in. So I tend to encourage people, hey, blanket, sheet, quilt, king size is actually a better way of doing it.
Yeah, we got to have something to grab to lower you down. Otherwise, it's not very pretty. So king size is the best.
Yeah, several places in the statutes it says with dignity. Now, nobody's ever adequately defined that to me, but
A dignified burial.
I've made up a set of rules here. It's whatever's acceptable to the people standing around at the moment. That's where dignity comes from. Because if lightning goes to popping real close, a lot of things change.
I agree with you. You're absolutely right. It's freedom of choice, and it is up to the family. And if they feel as if that's dignified, that's what we have to respect. And I agree with you. As far as shrouding is concerned and lowering, you are correct. Sometimes the ropes and the things like that can be very awkward. Where when you can lower someone down with a big king size sheet, as you mentioned, it really is not only beautiful, but it makes the job a lot simpler for the family members. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because not many people do that, nor do they even realize that's done. Very few.
Apparently, there's no law anywhere requiring a body be in a container. Most cemeteries require a vault, and the rest of it's hype and scam.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And that's another good point. I say that to my families as well. Believe it or not, we have had several burials where people went all natural, and that sounds very unusual. But what we say to the family is, this is a matter of what they want. We, as a cemetery staff, will provide that service. But you will find people who want things like that, and it's good that you've mentioned that, because people do need to know their rights. This has really been a great conversation. What do you think you'd like the viewers to know a little bit about Glendale Memorial Nature Preserve? What makes it so special?
I think it's special to us for sure. Us as individuals that live out here, that you got to see it to believe it. Take a day trip out here, for sure. It's a beautiful, the feeling that you get whenever you walk in is unlike any other. You don't realize you're standing in a cemetery for the most part because we keep the natural flora and fauna just grown up around it. You see the animals and the birds and the nature, and it doesn't feel morbid.
This isn't a real answer to your question, but some years ago, a guy came here. I cannot recall his name, but we were almost the last green cemetery in America. He had made the rounds of 33, I think, green cemeteries at that point in time. This was 3 or 5 years ago. And then his final report, verbal report, was that we were the most unique.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And
Yeah, our Rustosauruses definitely
yeah.
make us unique.
We did farm. This place was, we farmed a specialty seed crop, and we had to build machinery. And we right here where we're at physically is in the middle of basically a junkyard. Okay.
Art supplies.
Art supplies.
It's art supplies.
And we turned a lot of that junk into Rustosauruses, metal creatures.
but
That's
you know
probably
what
the most unique thing.
Well, you know what I find, without knowing you personally, other than the conversation we're having now, what I see to be most unique is you, John, and you, Fawn, and your attitude. I mean, to really make these things work, it takes a lot of ingenuity and a lot of acceptance and a lot of willingness for, to try. And we at the Global Green Burial Alliance really appreciate that. And you're definitely a pioneer in this, and people should look to you and realize that you don't have to reinvent the wheel, and you don't need a textbook. You do what feels right. You obviously are in touch with the land itself, by farming it, and all the things that you did. It's special to you. So in turn, it will be special to the families, the whole experience. So I commend you for the work you've done. We appreciate you coming on and speaking to our viewers. They need to know you exist. They need to embrace this. So John and Fawn, we really thank you. And viewers, you can learn more by visiting GlendaleNaturePreserve.org. Please support John and Fawn in their efforts down there in Florida, where it's a little chillier than it normally is, but not quite as cold as up in the north. And we really appreciate you, and thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you.
Yeah, we
Very
enjoy
well.
that y'all get the word out about alternative burials, because that's something that we're definitely passionate about, and unfortunately not a lot of people know exist, that we can do this. A lot of people think their only chance at a green burial is at the science body farms where you decompose naturally for science, but we are here, and we're across the entire US that this is a thing that's happening, and y'all are working hard to get it out there for sure.
Thank you both, and definitely in the future I may call upon you. We do things like forums monthly, and I think people really genuinely need insight like what you've provided. It really, I speak to people on a daily basis, and I'm amazed at how the bureaucracy has clouded their vision. Like you had mentioned, the governmental rules and regulations. It's not quite as difficult as people might think. It's just understanding how to get there. And people like yourself have gotten there. You understand the nuances, and that's important. So thanks again, John and Fawn. We appreciate it.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.